Hello, ladies and gentlemen. After a very, very long time of no dailies, it is my thrill, my pleasure, my absolute delight to announce that it is currently Thursday, March 28th, 2013, and this is Day 9 Daily number 563, where we learn to be a better gamer. For the last 2 weeks, we've been learning that I struggle with single-player games against myself. Before that was MLG and the Heart of the Swarm launch, and before that was pretty normal. I was doing dailies then. But it's been a while, and I've missed you. Oh, how have you been? How have you been? You look good. Have you lost weight? I'm sure it's true. In today's daily, we're going to be looking at a great Zerg vs. Protoss game between Grubby and ＫiLLeR. And in this game, it's going to put both players in a very unusual situation that will require a lot of in-game judgment. It's not so much about the build orders and the exact strategies that we're going to be following. It's a lot more of the just sort of how do we deal with this unusual spot, which I think is pretty important, given the fact that in Heart of the Swarm, there's a lot of times you'll get thrown off your builds, and this is the perfect game to look at that. So there's a lot of cool tactics, there's a lot of weirdness that goes on. I want to talk a little bit about that in a moment. Oh, that's so good. You know, I think when my alt keys is a little bit stuck, I actually, if you're seeing graphical artifacts, I'm terribly sorry. My encoder's a little weird. Let's do a low frame rate daily, shall we? Yes. I think I like that. For any of you who are new tuning in, because of course Heart of the Swarm just got released, welcome. Thrilled to have you. In this show, we're going to be looking, in general, in the Day 9 Daily, looking at various really good players and analyzing why they do what they do and how you can do it too. And etc. And that's about it. So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing. In part one, we're going to look at specifically what the openings are of these two players, and we're going to get a sense of what they're doing in response to the sort of weird situations they're being put in. The second one, in part two, we're going to look at more of the mid-game decisions that are sort of unfolding, how the effects of the early games put us in these weird spots, and what the decisions are going to be made then. And then in part three, both players are going to have no economy, and we're going to also figure out what to do then, because that's just kind of exciting. So let's go ahead and hop into the game and begin our part one analysis, where we have none other than the wonderful Grubby up in the top right corner. I'll turn the sound on. Definitely follow him, twitter.com/follow-grubby, and of course twitch.tv/follow-grubby. He's amazing, streams a lot, famous Warcraft 3 player. If you don't know Grubby, then come on, go watch some Grubby. And of course down in the bottom right is KiLLeR, formerly of Team Dignitas. I almost tried to message him using the R button. What? That makes no sense. But of course, twitter.com/KiLLeR, SC2. You can follow him there. This is a Chilean Zerg player. KiLLeR's considered generally one of the best players in Latin America, along with Major. I would say that it's pretty fair to say that they're 1 and 2. And Grubby is one of the better Protosses, really outside of Korea. We're on the map StarStation, which already is an unusual position to be in, given the way Wings of Liberty works. We can spawn in all 4 start locations. And if you think about the Wings of Liberty maps, there are things like Daybreak. I know there's other maps in Daybreak. Daybreak, Cloud Kingdom, Ohana forces only 3 possible starting position, yours, and then there's only 2 that you have to check. It's not actually all 3. Antigua Shipyard, not a 4-player map. It's a cross-spawn location only. This results in some unusual openings, given that we actually do have 4 bases. So Grubby's going to be doing the standard early expand sort of play. And let's talk a little bit about KiLLeR and his mode of play. They're going to be talking. I have a complete inability to both comment on their conversation and the analysis of the game at the same time. So cool, Grubby's going to do a reasonable move. He's going to be checking these scout positions first. Scouting here first or scouting here first, both are fine. Generally, if you are feeling really antsy, you scout one way with 1 probe, and then when this probe moves down to build a forge, we can send this probe out to scout as well. This was sometimes popular on Tal'Darim Altar. But here the forge going down is another way of saying, on this 4-player map, I have no guarantee that I will get an early scout off. Left is close by ground. The bottom right position is close by ground. So I want to make sure that I have some early defense in case there is a 6 pool or some sort of early Zergling harass. Now, of course, we don't really want to straight up say, oh wait, do I have the music on? I've never done that before. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna be doing some of that. I like that. That sounds great. Let me... Oopsie daisies, I forgot there was a time zone change, so I have my daily listed at the wrong time. But yes, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and continue rocking said music. I'm feeling that. That feels quite good to me. So either way, this sort of early scout pattern by Grubby makes sense, but we don't ever want to be, just defensive. We'll see this a lot, that if you play just defensively, you're going to get yourself into huge trouble. You want to be both aggressive and defensive at the same time. So this is another way of saying if you're early pooling, sure, I'm fine, but if you are early expanding, I'm going to cannon rush you. So this is literally the sort of contract that you plant before yourself. If I am going for a 13 forge, that is an extremely, extremely early forge. You really, truly must go for some sort of cannon rush to sort of justify that you've done that. So this sort of stuff is the also the contract that you sort of sign up for in KILLER's shoes. If I'm going to be going for an early expand, like hatch first, I'm going to have to deal with this a reasonably high percentage of the time. Now, for the note, they're both having a fun conversation because they wound up sparring against each other on the ladder like 7 or 8 times in a row. So they were playing all day and Grubby was cannon rushing a ton. But Grubby just doing some very nice wall-offing with the pylon and reconstructing with the cannons. So this is, I would say, a reasonable situation at the start. To recap, let's review everything we've talked about. KILLER says, it's a 4-player map. I can probably get away with early expanding. Hatch, then pool. Grubby says, I kind of have to go for an early forge because I don't know if you're going to 6-pool. Therefore, if I see this early expand, great. I'm going to be doing my usual thing. And just cannon rushing. So now we're in this weird spot where we see KILLER. KILLER is just re-expanding, and he's going to be re-expanding yet again. And this is where I actually want to pause. Actually, before he takes this expansion, let's go to like 340, right when this cancels. Here's where we have to do some on-the-fly sort of analysissement. Yeah, here we go. Nice. So here, already, we're in a weird spot. I was actually talking with one of my friends, who was trying to get back into laddering, was really excited about Heart of the Swarm, had a build order that involved going for pool and then expanding. However, Protoss built a pylon at the expansion. And my friend was just like, oh, and like his head imploded and he didn't know what to do. He like, any amount of being thrown off, especially if you are kind of used to going down certain lines, is really gross. A lot of players right now in KILLER's position just leave. And, I mean, I would encourage you not to do that. It's good to sort of push yourself. But still, I can understand being in a situation kind of being like, ugh, what do I do? I'm actually going to point out a tab that is completely useless in almost all circumstances. Economy, technology, and army. Upon Grubby doing this, Grubby has spent some money on these pylons and cannons and has delayed his own Nexus a lot. So, Grubby has invested a lot of money to be able to do this. You can't really see it, but here, this is 500 total bucks invested. And KILLER had his expansion denied for quite some time, so he lost a little bit of money. Who lost more money in this circumstance? Was it more worth it from the Protoss end? Was it more worth it from the Zerg end? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I say I don't know because there's no reason to force yourself to do really complicated analysis if you can do really simple analysis. What do we know is definitely delayed for Protoss. His tech, his gateway. He can't do warp gate pressure or Stargate pressure or any of that sort of pressure very quickly at all. We're not going to be under the threat of a lot of early, like, zealot mothership core harass. It's not going to be as dangerous. We also know for a fact that our own tech as Zerg is not that delayed. In fact, if you look at the Zerg, he already has a spawning pool and his queens coming up. He might have to delay these refineries a little bit, these geysers a little bit, but not tremendously so. Also in terms of a third expansion, totally not really a possibility for Grubby to take early. So in essence, Protoss tech is delayed. Unlikely for Protoss to be doing a third anytime soon. And Protoss army might be slightly delayed as well. Zergling's doing a smart thing and getting ready to do this sort of check around with everything. Yeah, look at that. Just general good scouting by cKiLLeR. So in cKiLLER's shoes, there's another thing that's guaranteed. cKiLLER, guaranteed, cannot turtle. Why? Because these bases will never be joined together with creep. This is something that Grubby should take significant note of. There's no good way to defend this, say, with spine crawlers and speed zerglings. This base has 1, 2, 3 attack angles. This base has 1, 2 attack angles. This base has 1 attack angle. Contrast this with Daybreak that has exactly 2. 1 at your third, 1 at your natural. So cKiLLER has to do a unit-based defense. I would say that from a Protoss point of view, we can step into Grubby's shoes and we can go, oh, okay, I guarantee that my Zerg player will be split up, and he will have to do some sort of unit-based defense. That's the only way he can really defend these bases. And now I'll note another thing from top down. Alright, cKiLLER can't defend with, you know, goofy mass spine ling. What else can he do early on to defend himself? I said units, but there's only 2. Speedlings and roaches. Man, the music completely stops when I pause it. Man, the music stopped, right? This is apparently a really important point. Zerglings and roaches are it. Zerglings and roaches are it. That's really the only defense that cKiLLER can go for. So as Protoss, you know Zerglings and roaches are likely to be happening. So let's see how Grubby exploits this. cKiLLER's going to get his double geysers. Is going to be going triple queen, getting his macro up. Very reasonable response. Grubby's going to kill the neutral structure with his photon cannon, like a boss. And move out with Mothership Core Stalker. Nothing wrong with this sort of harassment, because he's up against almost certainly just lings and roaches, and slow lings, and slow roaches at that. Still have a good sense of what's going on here. Now, I want to just go through some if, or some either-or situations. Either the Zerg player goes for an early Roach Warren and can hold off a lot of aggression, or he's going to lose a lot of slowlings. Ah, that delicious coffee. So Grubby is applying this pressure to try to force units, but it's not to try to deny drones. We don't know if we're ahead or behind in economy because of this thing. We're actually trying to force roaches. It's a pretty simple attack. We're trying to force our opponent to get a lot of roaches up here. This moment is hilarious. I will actually now point out what happens in the chat. And no! And of course, cKiLLER, like every single player in Latin America, types XD. No one in Latin America types this, and if you look at their keyboards, you will understand why. It's a lot easier to type XD. The colon is somewhere weird. You have to like hold Shift and Alt and then another button to put it up. Screw that, XD. All the way. All the way. So that little bit of pressure, followed up by a rather unusual attack timing from Grubby, is going to force roaches out of cKiLLER. This is a late layer. We can't look at the timer because this is an unusual spot to be in, right? We had a cannon rush. It's not late because it's at 8:30. It's late because we went for Roach Warren and roaches before we built this layer. That's the significant thing that's affecting everything here. So as Grubby moves down here, Grubby is essentially trying to say, all right, I'm going to apply pressure with stalkers. to try to force you to stay on roaches. It's a way to control what is going on. Also, this is true, but I'm not really going to worry about it that much. With warp gates, we can do something like warp in zealots, and then do a little push in and attack. So, okay. Now, I want you to put on your either-or hats. Almost all strategies have either-or components to them. And very often, the either-or will look like this. Either killer makes lings and roaches and defends this attack, or he fucking dies. Ta-da! Yay! And the reason this makes for really easy analysis is that I know I'll either be up against a sort of low-tech, high-army Zerg, or I'll have extra ladder points. Easy peasy analysis, right? So we've gotten into kind of a standard-ish looking opening from kKiLLeR. 3 hatches before really any gas. But we know we have to have a ling roach defense to be able to defend these types of pushes. So Grubby is just going to force kKiLLeR down this path. And I likewise want to note this moment in time, I think, is a very useful way to highlight why Grubby could not have taken an early third. Because he would just die, right? There's a lot of lings, and there's a lot of roaches about to pop out. Grubby can't defend it after he's done this cannon rush. But that's fine. Let's just force Zerg. Let's force him down. Whenever there's an even, or an either-or, where one of the things is death, like, again, roachling defense, or kKiLLeR dies. We call this forcing. Grubby has forced kKiLLeR to go for ling roach. Okay, so Grubby is not going to get any sort of big win here in terms of direct damage. I mean, units lost is pretty negligible, to be honest. Maybe doing a little bit of pushing. You have the Mothership Core here to time bomb to help defend our own units and to help apply pressure. But here we are. Here we are at this moment in time, this wonderful moment in time where we've been looking largely at kKiLLeR. Now, I've been almost talking about kKiLLeR as though he's doing something wrong. I've been describing this play from, or this response from kKiLLeR as, he's being forced, Grubby's, manipulating and pushing all that. kKiLLeR, I would say, is playing magnificently right now. He's in a very smart response, right? Let's think about it from Zerg's point of view before we step away to this break. From the Zerg's point of view, oh, this cannon rush happened. Cancel, double, expand. Excellent read by kKiLLeR to properly detect that there was pressure coming and to build that roach warren early. More importantly, proper response from kKiLLeR to build a few roaches earlier than normal because he has this expansion, which is very far away from this expansion. And most importantly, there's no creep joining the 2 bases, or even into his main. So kKiLLeR's done all the right things thus far, but his options have still been very limited. And interestingly, the effect of this cannon rush followed by the stalker pressure can best be seen in what's going on in Grubby's base after this attack begins. He's beginning to get a robo bay, or excuse me, a robo facility. He'll be adding on this extra ground armor. He's adding on immortals. Why immortals? Because he's either going to win or he's going to force his opponent to make roaches. So that's perfect. Extra little bit of defense, but look at this. 2 extra gateways. Ah. And there is the ground armor upgrade. So great. This was the net effect of all of this, is that kKiLLeR has been put a little bit behind. In fact, looking at kKiLLeR's base, we can see that he only has a roach warren with speed, Zerglings with speed. He has no upgrades. He has no evolution chamber. He has a pretty reasonable amount of drones, but not a fantastic amount of drones. Grubby has done a good job keeping Zerg in a little box. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be stepping away from a break, or stepping away to a 2-minute break. When we come back, we're going to look at the mid-game. How does Grubby exploit this, and how does kKiLLeR deal with being in this little tiny box to try to shove back? We'll see it then. Bam! See you in a bit. Until then, I say we listen to the amazing music of Child Actor. Yeah!